What if the most powerful government in the world secretly held the key to Nnamdi Kanu's freedom? Could the key to Nnamdi Kanu's freedom be sitting in a safe in Washington, D.C., while we look to the court in Abuja? A much larger trial is happening in the corridors of power across the Atlantic. We are not talking about public statements or obvious diplomatic pressure on Britain or Nigeria. Today, we reveal the invisible hand of the US government in the fate of the Lion of the East. Prepare to see the geopolitical chessboard from an entirely new angle. I am Pastor Maxwell Nnawuihe. Everyone says the US doesn't care about Biafra. But what if I told you that the silence of the State Department is actually a loud diplomatic signal? Behind the one Nigeria rhetoric lies a strategic roadmap that may lead directly to Nnamdi Kanu's release. Beneath the surface of international headlines, the US government plays a far more intricate and influential role that you've ever been told. This video will expose the behind-the-scenes maneuvers and unacknowledged privileges that could profoundly impact Nnamdi Kanu's future, challenging everything you thought you knew about his struggle for freedom. The clock is ticking on Nnamdi Kanu's freedom. And what if its ultimate speed is being dictated not by Abuja but by Washington, D.C.? Nigeria stands at a breaking point right now, with the 2025 Kanu's life sentence still fresh and international pressure mounting very strongly. The next few weeks of US-Nigeria relations will determine if the region finds peace or descends into a chaos that even the giants cannot contain. The invisible hand of Washington. We are now unpacking the US State Department quiet diplomatic pressure. The US State Department operates on the principle of quiet diplomacy. Quiet diplomacy, yes. Since the 2021 rendition of Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya, they have moved from public silence to private stern warnings. We've seen the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention from the UN, which the US heavily influences, demand Nnamdi Kanu's unconditional release. Know this: Washington is not just watching. They are sending a message that the era of extraordinary rendition must end to maintain Nigeria's credibility that exists on papers. We know that the Nigerian government under President Tinubu paid $9 million to a DCI group lobbying firm at Washington, D.C. for a year contract. That was followed by the New York Times publication of a screwdriver salesman at Onitsha Market, southeastern Nigeria, Emeka Umabalasi. You and I know that this is an international propaganda that is trying to heap the blame for US strikes in Sokoto on Igbo. Heap it on Igbo. Blame the Igbo. They want to also use it to divert the attention from the illegalities and the unconstitutionality surrounding the life sentencing of Nnamdi Kanu and his continued detention. New York Times forgot that the Nigerian government, through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, officially said on Friday, 26th of December 2025, that it coordinated the attacks with the US government, providing intelligence, and approved the US airstrikes on ISIS targets in Sokoto, Nigeria on Christmas Day 2025. The New York Times propaganda publication was on 18th January 2026. The New York Times propaganda cannot stand this time. This was after the $9 million lobby contract was signed or shared. But this cannot influence the US government under President Trump to look away from Nnamdi Kanu's freedom or Christian persecution in Nigeria. It cannot happen. The US government involvement isn't just a side note. It's a critical, often hidden determinant in this high-stakes international saga. You will see how their subtle influence and strategic decisions are shaping the very path to Nnamdi Kanu's release or continued detention. We're going to find out. Proverbs 21 verse 1, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like the rivers of water. He turns it wherever he wishes. God has turned the heart of President Trump towards Nnamdi Kanu's release and the protection for persecuted Christians in Nigeria. No bribe of $9 million, it doesn't matter how much it is, that can be able to turn it away. No lobbying can be able to turn it away. Let's examine potential US intelligence involvement and leverage. Think back to Nnamdi Kanu's capture in Nairobi, Kenya. It is widely reported that the US SIGINT, which is Signals Intelligence, documented the entire operation. This intelligence leverage is often used in backroom meetings. When US officials meet Nigerian leadership, they don't just talk. They present facts that the Nigerian government cannot deny. This data serves as a sword of Damocles over those who authorized the oppression. As they cannot dodge the sword, they will eventually consent to Nnamdi Kanu's release. In highlighting the complex web of US interest in West Africa, we discovered that the US views Nigeria as a pivot state for counter-terrorism against ISIS, West African province ISWAP, and Boko Haram, and of course oil. However, the rise of China's influence in the Gulf of Guinea has changed the game. If the US sees that Nnamdi Kanu's continued detention is fueling a regional insurgency or insecurities that threatens their oil assets and security interests, they will force a political solution to protect their bottom line. And that means if it is to release Nnamdi Kanu, if it is to support the Biafra freedom, they are going to do it to protect their bottom line. They cannot run loss because of Nigeria that failed to protect its citizens and actually prove what sovereignty is all about. They cannot. Geopolitical chase and Biafra's porn. Nigeria's strategic importance versus human rights concerns. In the eyes of Washington, Nigeria is too big to fail. This is the Realpolitik perspective. Sometimes human rights take a backseat to regional stability. However, when the giant of Africa begins to stumble under the weight of its eternal strife, the US shifts its realpolitik perspective, as it's happening right now. They realize that holding Kanu is no longer a stabilizing move, but a catalyst for the very disintegration they possibly fear. Yes, you heard that right. Analyzing the US balancing act. Unity versus rule of law. The US supports a unified Nigeria on paper. But they are the world's self-appointed guidance of the rule of law. After the 2022 Court of Appeal, the ruling that discharged an acquitted Maxwell Nnawuihe, the US position shifted. They began to view the Nigerian government's refusal to obey its own courts as a threat to democratic institutions, something Washington cannot publicly ignore if they want to stay relevant in Africa. Consider the US stance on the Nnamdi Kanu's conviction on the 20th of November 2025, while the High Court gave a life sentence. The U.S. Department's country report on human rights practices increasingly highlights this as a judicial overreach. The role of international agreements and extradition treaties. The U.S.-Nigeria extradition treaty is a two-way street. By violating international norms in Nnamdi Kanu's case, Nigeria risks its standing in other legal cooperations with the U.S. So the U.S. can use legal technicalities as pathway to facilitate Nnamdi Kanu's release, perhaps through a third-party country, in order to allow Nigeria save face, so that Nigeria can be able to save face, while Nnamdi Kanu regains his freedom. The wheel of justice sometimes may turn slowly, but they are being turned by forces seen and unseen. The U.S. government is the earthly hammer, but the hand that swings that hammer is much higher. Aka Chineke, the hands of God, Aka Jehovah Nememma, is the one swinging this hammer, and no power can stop it. What do you think? Is the U.S. government doing enough, or are they playing a double game? Leave your comment below. If you believe in the power of truth and the necessity of justice for Nnamdi Kanu, hit the like button, subscribe to Maxwell Nnawuihe channel, share this video to every group, to all the groups you belong. Very important. I will see you again in the episode 2. God bless you.